I'm live. Hello. Today is Queer Quarantine Day 17, and I'm Sweet Gwendolyn. And today is Tuesday, April 7th, to be exact. And we have Rita over here. She's comfortably sitting on the floor. But perhaps we can get her attention with a treat. Would you like a treat, Rita? Jump up. Here she comes. All the way. Jump up. Oh, good girl. Sit. Sit down. Good girl. There we go. Let's see if I can tilt that to make her a little more in frame if she chooses to sit down and join us. Anyway, we have some updates today. Today was actually, as far as living in a pandemic goes, a relatively slow news day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the show with all of the most recent numbers. In my opinion, it's in many ways the most depressing part of the show because it is, every number is obviously a person. So if you would like to just skip this part, feel free to go ahead and jump ahead 2 or 3 minutes, and I will ultimately be talking about my day and Rita's and my adventures walking through the neighborhood. Oh, and I'm going to give a book report. Oh, and I'm going to speculate about how this whole thing is going to play out. So, but yes, to start with today's numbers. So today, the number of worldwide infections is just shy of 1.5 million people. And so far, just shy of 82,000 people have died worldwide. In the United States, just shy of 400,000 people are infected, and just shy of 13,000 people have died, and that includes 731 people who died within 24 hours in New York. So it's definitely picking up the pace. In Texas, we're up to just over 8,000 people infected and 159 dead. And here in Travis County, where Austin is, we have 554 officially infected and 7 dead, although we more than likely have much more in both categories. And just to hit on one other depressing thing for the people who are skipping this part, they don't have to hear it later. An article came out in the New York Times today finding massive racial disparities in terms of who is dying, and I would probably cry if I read the actual numbers out, but the basic gist is that it's stuff like Black people make up around 70% of infections in places where they are between 16 and 30% of the population, and then their odds of dying once they are among the infected are still higher than white people. So there's a lot of factors going into that, and while we won't know all of them for sure until a month or years down the road till we know more about the virus, it seems to have a lot to do with underlying health conditions, access to resources, living in more crowded conditions, and I'm sure we will find medical discrimination as well. So that's awful. But moving on to other news, just sort of a rundown, and there actually are not a ton of headlines today, but not surprisingly, almost all of them have to do with people grossly mismanaging the outbreak. But in San Francisco, whistleblowers are calling attention to the fact that they are trying to move all of the homeless people in the entire city into one massive shelter, like literally just like a giant kind of gymnasium size room. It's for bigger. I think it might be a convention center or something. It's literally just this giant room. They're all going to be sleeping on literally mats on the floor, and they're not allowed to bring any possessions, and they're literally emptying all of the homeless shelters out to dump the people into this one place. They have very limited cleaning resources, and they all have to share the same bathroom. And and there's like limited hand washing and hand sanitizer and all that. So anyway, hopefully since like it came to people's attention with whistleblowers before the shelters especially being used, hopefully that will be stopped. But get it together, San Francisco. They are horrible with their homeless problem anyway, but that's just, I mean, come on, you know? And also shocking news about mismanaging the epidemic, the Supreme Court actually got involved with mismanaging the epidemic. Wisconsin had their primaries today, which of course has a number of down ballot candidates as well for just local positions and everything. And what had happened was that, you know, as things have been playing out, people only very rapidly realized that they weren't going to feel comfortable going to the polling places, even if they were going to be open. So there was just this massive, you know, surge in requests for absentee ballots where people can just mail it in. But the issue was that they just could not meet the demand to get all the ballots out in time. And the rule typically is that the ballots have to be in the mail by today, like the postmark has to be today. Well, they literally just physically cannot get the ballots out to the people who asked for them by today for them to mail it in. So the state officials had agreed that they would push back the deadline 1 week just so everyone who requested a ballot could get one. But that would make too much sense. And don't ask me why it's always Republicans who want to suppress the votes, because it seems like I don't even see how this would be a Republican advantage. But anyway, they should get all the way to the Supreme Court. The Wisconsin State Supreme Court had, I believe, backed this up. But yeah, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 along liberal conservative justice lines to uphold today's date. And the reasoning for that was, and it is true, but it's a gross, I think, misinterpretation of this, that basically it goes against general standards to change the laws in an election in the days before an election. The idea is that that's like changing the rules after, you know, in the middle of the game. However, this is kind of different. This doesn't offer any sort of an obvious advantage to either side. It literally just lets everyone get a vote, and it literally risks people's lives. There are almost definitely people who are going to go to the polling stations and contract it there, as well as poll workers who will contract it today. I mean, they've probably killed people with this ruling. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg pointed out in her dissent that the rule for voting is that as long as people get in line before the polls close, that they're still allowed to vote, because some places just have like hours long lines. So as long as you arrived at the center in time, you're ultimately allowed to vote however long the line is. And so her, I believe, correct argument was that this is the same thing. These people requested their absentee ballots well ahead of the deadline. So that basically counts as having gotten in line to vote. And for reasons I don't understand, she was overruled on that. So anyway, luckily other states are working to get ahead of things now that obviously the states that are holding their primaries now are things escalated very rapidly, and hopefully more states are getting ahead of the curve in terms of getting their absentee ballots. And as I discussed a few days ago, there are states that are actually looking to just mail an absentee ballot to every single person in the state, registered voter. So anyway, let's see, moving on. Oh yeah, I don't have all the information in front of me on this, and it's depressing to get into, but as I've mentioned before, I just wanted to say this is still going on. Basically every state that likes to make a name for itself for being anti-abortion has at this point passed and not passed, but has declared a moratorium on abortions as a non-essential service, and it's making its way through the courts everywhere. And in Texas, I think there was actually just another court that agreed with the last court's ruling, which overturned the court before that's ruling, that as if it could happen. So right now, you cannot have an abortion in Texas unless it's for the life or health of the mother. But I just read an article written by a woman who was trying to get an abortion that seemed pretty clearly medically necessary to me, and she was being denied it. So I wish the article had more information on what the criteria is for health of the mother, but I don't know how on earth that wouldn't qualify. But anyway, so yeah, that's just going on everywhere in the country, and it depends on where you live, where, as the circuit courts are making their rulings, and they're ruling differently on it in different places. So that is going on. And oh yes, and this isn't my point, but someone did point out that, well, if they're that sure that fetuses are people, are they going to get their $500 stimulus check? Because it's $1,200 for, adults and $500 for children. So yeah, I don't think they're doing that. They like to stick women, or I should say people, myself being a trans man, people of all genders can get pregnant if they were born with vaginas. So let's see. Oh yeah, and Walmart is facing a wrongful death suit over COVID-19. The first of, I'm sure, very, 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 very many that are going to sweep the nation. But as you can infer, a Walmart worker died of COVID-19. His family is blaming Walmart, and it sounds like they have some pretty reasonable complaints, and I hope they win. Let's see. Oh yeah, and also, just on the topic of box stores having workers with COVID-19, at this point, like almost all of the local grocery stores, certainly the two HEBs in my area, have had workers with COVID-19, as well as another one where was that? I can't remember which store it was, but somewhere in North Austin has it too. So I don't know. They just, put out a press release. We're doing a deep clean, and just keep going. But man, I feel like grocery stores are like the petri dishes of our times, and I'm really avoiding them. Oh yeah, and of course, mega churches, not all, but a lot, are still insisting on holding their prayer services. I mainly thought it was, religious delirium and megalomania, but Dan Savage probably correctly pointed out that money was a huge motivator. People are having their worship at home services. They're not putting money in the collection plates. They're less likely to Venmo the church money than actually put the money in there in the collection plate when it's going around. And anyway, at this point, there have been a lot of outbreaks that have been directly tied to churches. So I wish they would take better care of their flocks. And some of them are like being fined, and then they just do it again next weekend because God's on their side. God told me to. That's a great movie from the 70s, which I highly recommend anyone who's watching this look up and watch on YouTube. It is one of the most non-cookie cutter movies I've ever seen in my life. You will just, from moment to moment, you cannot guess what is happening next. And it is on YouTube, directed by Larry Cohen. Anyway, oh yeah, but back to the megachurch thing. On the positive side, there's backlash against them. I never really thought of churches as having landlords, but one landlord is getting some national headlines for changing the locks on the church he rents to prevent them from having services during the pandemic. And also an insurance company canceled a church's insurance policy, which I'm sure we'll be seeing a ton of those in the future because, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what that is, like liability, I would guess. But yeah, no insurance company is going to sponsor someone's liability policy if they're refusing to abide by local shelter-in-place laws. So to move on to the personal, because yeah, like I said, I mean, it was pretty brief in the news today. But let's see, Rita and I had some adventures walking through the neighborhood. I'll get to that in a second because it was pretty funny. But just to go over some other stuff first, I contacted Amazon today. Just so you know, if you want to ever contact Amazon directly, if you click on help, you can. They have a chat support option, And I support the Amazon workers strike. I completely support it. Their demands are completely reasonable. They just want safer work conditions as far as the virus and sanitizing things. And they also want hazard pay, which I think is also extremely reasonable, especially given that Jeff Bezos is literally the richest man in the entire world. He can afford it. Let's keep people safe, you know? And anyway, I've had some stuff in my basket on Amazon for, well, however long the strike's been going, like a week and a half or something now, that I have not formally purchased yet because I want the strike to be resolved. And it's only getting bigger because it was originally just one specific warehouse, and now other warehouses are joining in, and they fired like the strike leader, and so people are angry about that on top of the other stuff. So anyway, I contacted their customer service through chat and asked them to please let me Amazon know that the reason I hadn't purchased the stuff in my basket or the other stuff that I needed to purchase was because I was waiting for them to meet the workers' demands. And then I encouraged the guy who was chatting with me from Amazon to consider striking in his area too, because he deserves better pay and benefits and all that. He seemed to enjoy talking to me. So I agitated for workers' rights today, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I made this wonderful batch of apple pancake batter the other day that I'm still living off of because it's so good, and it's really labor intensive, so you have to make a huge batch for it to be worth it. But I completely diced up 2 apples. The apple pieces just go into the batter, like essentially normal pancake batter. And then the other diced apple, you put in a frying pan along with some brown sugar and water and cinnamon. And you basically just reduce it almost to like a candied jelly. And, maybe I did say that the other day. I really can't remember, but it's worth saying twice if I did, because that is good. And that has been a real perk for me to be eating. And I'm still practicing my Spanish every single day. I have moved on. Well, I'm still doing Duolingo, but I'm having to really slow down on that because it is driving me nuts when I get it wrong, just because like I hit the wrong thing with my thumb. I don't know. I believe me, after like 2 weeks of blazing through it like that, I was probably due for a breather anyway. But yeah, that's both the beauty and the frustration of learning Spanish on your phone, is that you have to do it all with your thumbs, and your thumbs don't always hit the right thing. So yeah, I'm doing Spanish nursery rhymes and stuff like that for now, which is great. And I wanted to give a brief book report. Ta-da! Which is the super, super, super readable book. It's only 128 pages. It's basically written in a highly readable, frequently asked questions format. It's just great for anyone who's ever had any interest in the topic. I'm not looking to convert or anything, but I've always felt like Buddhists really kind of know what's going on. And I guess the few times I've ever tried to look into it, I was just sort of put off by, I don't know, the people who I found presenting the information were either like kind of new agey, which, is their journey and it's fine, but it wasn't something I vibed with, or they would be like religious Buddhists, because Buddhism doesn't believe in God or not. It's completely compatible with any other religion. You can be like a Christian Buddhist or a Muslim Buddhist or whatever. It's really just an art of, I guess, mindfulness. And so anyway, now that I finally found this really great, easy to read, I don't know, just like I said, frequently asked question guide on Buddhism. Turns out that I have completely independently on my own been more or less practicing Buddhism. I just came to all these conclusions on my own. Obviously, Buddhists have like gone much more in depth and have really thought about it and laid it out. But essentially, I think if you are a compassionate person who strives for objectivity, and you're kind of laid back, you've more or less been accidentally practicing Buddhism from all your life too. And anyway, I just really enjoyed it. It came out in 2018. No Nonsense Buddhism for Beginners by Noah Rasheda. And I'm almost done with another book, Patti Smith's autobiography about her and Robert Mapplethorpe. So I'll probably be giving a book report on that in the next couple of days. I'm going to end it with this funny story. So there is a podcast that I freaking love called Feast of Fun that my friends Mark and Fausto do. And I got behind some, like, trying to listen to episodes while I walk Rita through the neighborhood. And the headphones I have are just really crappy and they won't stay in. So what I've started doing is I just put the speaker on, and have it playing in my pocket. And generally it doesn't, I don't think I'm disturbing people in their houses or anything, but it's loud enough for me to hear. And anyway, I swear to God, I actually got hollered at earlier today. He's like, "Hey, female trouble." And I was just like, "Oh, have you seen the movie?" He's like, "No, I just like your shirt." And anyway, he was loosely hitting on me, but not overly creepy or anything. It was just, I'm 44. I don't get hollered at a lot. So anyway, so that was interesting. And anyway, just as I'm like, trying to keep it chill, like, "Oh, hey, all right, well, thanks. Nice to meet you." The podcast in my pocket is like, "Well, penises are totally safe. Yeah, you can't catch COVID-19 from a penis. But what if someone with COVID on their hands has been handling that penis?" And anyway, so yeah, that was blasting out of my pocket as I was trying to walk away with a straight face. I guess the dangers of listening to Feast of Fun while walking through the neighborhood without using headphones. But anyway, that's basically it. We're still having a pretty good day. I don't know. I really don't think there's anything else to report. I totally left out the President Pelosi thing I had in the title for this video. So yeah, just quickly, I just want to say I couldn't help but notice that at these press conferences, so Mike Pence and President Trump have both said they've made a big deal about how they're not going to wear face masks. And then they stand right next to each other at these press conferences. And then they talk into these same microphones. And of course, like, they're not even like fazed by the fact that Boris Johnson totally got it from pulling like the same, "Oh, I'm not going to do it" crap while he's like pandering to his base, and then he's in ICU now. So anyway, it occurred to me, well, if one of them gets it, the other one is definitely going to get it. And that if one or both of them become incapacitated or even die, third in line is Nancy Pelosi, which I don't think has even crossed their minds, but I'm betting it's crossed her mind. So for the record, I don't think that would actually be necessarily beneficial. I mean, in some ways it would be a relief to get someone with a decent head on their shoulders handling the crisis, but I don't wish this, well, I don't wish it on, but more to the point, it's just that I think there would be some real problems if the presidency switched from Republican to Democrat due to the death or incapacitation to the two top guys. And there are a lot of gun nuts and religious fanatics who have been buying a hell of a lot of guns. And I think just people would freak the fuck out. But yeah, who knows? President Pelosi, it could happen. Could totally happen. So I guess we'll see. Anyway, that's it. Let's see if I can finally end this stream gracefully. No, apparently. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back again soon. Bye-bye. Ta-da.